Okay. Welcome to The Secret Truth. I'm George Butler along with my co host.
Charlotte Littlefield. Good morning, George.
Okay, man, it's a good morning up here in Austin. It's going to get 100 degrees, I'm sure. How about up there in Missouri? How are you?
Oh, it's beautiful summer. We're having a mild summer. It's going to be nice and warm today, but nice and cool in the evenings. It's been a mild summer, but it's really nice.
Okay, today we're going to be putting out a 9/11 special. We've got the 18th anniversary coming up tomorrow, and then we're pre-recording on the day before. We're here in Austin, Texas, on the 10th of September, 2019, and
And
Charlotte,
Missouri,
yeah,
2019.
yeah. Where were you on the day of 9/11, Charlotte? What think back where you were when you first discovered this thing going on.
I had just moved from Iowa to Texas, and I had just involved myself with the Texas Army National Guard. If I was preparing, or I had just done, memory serves me correctly, I was preparing to go on active duty special work orders for maintenance, and I was in my mother's home. But as I transitioned and moved from Iowa to Texas, I stayed with my mom for a month or so with my kids, and I remember walking into her living room and seeing it on the television.
Right, your children were very young at the time. Is that right?
Well, it was 18 years ago.
So they were like 3 or 4, 5 years old, maybe at the most, something like that.
Yes,
Something,
I
yeah.
mean,
But in that vicinity, they were
2000.
young. They were pre elementary school, both of them probably.
You
And
know
what
what
were
was
your first
interesting?
impression when you were watching this? What were your first thoughts, Charlotte?
I was reading a book at the time about. I was reading a book at the time, and my first thoughts were. I didn't have any first thoughts, George. It just occurred.
Well, I was sitting in a local restaurant. I won't say the name. It's over on Manshack Road here in Austin, South Austin, Texas. And we started seeing reports immediately right after the first, you could say, crash into the North Tower occurred. And we were trying to discern what had happened. Was this just an accident, or was it, a planned attack? We didn't know at the time. And then I was sitting there and I was watching the plane that actually hit the South Tower. I saw coming to the television screen. You know what I mean? And it flew down on the right side going south. And then all of a sudden, just a few minutes later, we saw a fire come out. We thought it was the North Tower, but we couldn't see the South Tower, which was behind the North Tower. The camera shot that they first televised was from the north, and it only had the North Tower in there, and the South Tower was behind it, and you couldn't see it. But we saw this fire come out, and we said, "Gosh, that didn't come out of the north. What happened?" And then they had a camera on the side, and it showed the second, the fire in the second building, the south building there. And so then it began to be a serious, attack on the country. And I guess you saw that develop later on that day, right?
I wasn't paying attention to the details of the matter. I just I became involved psychologically when they declared war.
Right.
It's
Well,
already caught up in the system of military involvement, and
oh, y'all were on high alert then, weren't you? Is that right?
we all remember the color rainbow, the orange, red, blue, green. Remember the scale? They
Oh,
tried
yeah.
to.
Right, right. So y'all were at a higher scale of alert than ever before, right?
No, nobody put me at alert. That was coming across the civilian media.
I see. Okay. But the military had its own alert
I
system,
don't
right?
know, George. I was affiliating. I don't know. I fell into my position with active duty special work orders, and I helped in the processing of officers wanting to return to the military.
Oh, okay, okay. Well, anyway, so since then we've been to several 9/11 Truth conferences. We were up in New York, and what did you think about all those speakers up there? What did you come away with? I know you helped me immensely with the production of the video. We live streamed that up in New York. What did you think? Thanks, Charlotte, of that Truth conference, 2010, New York City.
It was difficult. It was a long, hard, arduous journey. And staying behind that camera for 2 days straight to make sure that the live stream was functioning properly, that was a challenge, but it got handled.
Right, right. And there we met the head of A&E, 9/11 Truth also. He was there and he spoke, right?
Yeah,
And
he's since been married. He's Richard Gage got married this last couple years or so.
Richard did?
Yes, he did.
Oh, okay. What do you think about their theory on what happened with the thermite? I know you interviewed them. Now we had a truth conference out here in Austin before that. I know that was set up by Brave New Books, I think, and some other people. And you interviewed both. You both interviewed him, Richard, and I think it was Jones, wasn't it? At Brigham Young. I think I gave you two different cell phones, and you interviewed both of those. What'd you come away with the interview on that? They had discovered by that time the thermite, I believe.
Well, that was at the University of Texas. There was a symposium of some sort where Stephen Jones put forward his concerns and his hypothesis about thermite. I was there when he did it at the University of Texas. It was just it felt like it was profound. Uh, it was very profound experience to hear the media and know the news and hear one thing in the declaration of war, and then to be following this other track of scientific inquiry as to what actually occurred in those cement steel buildings.
Right.
It was surreal, but it happened, and now it's 18 years later.
The public in general, what do you think their opinion is? Do you think that they believe the government story, or they're apprehensive about the government line or the government story
I
explanation?
was such a activist for 9/11 Truth. We don't talk about it anymore.
Yeah, I know the public in general. Do they not want to hear about this anymore? Isn't that basically what they've reached a conclusion, or what?
Well, we went to war because of this, and it's a problem because the city of New York, the state of New York, the county of New York, the federal agencies that responded were inappropriate response agencies. And out of the inappropriate responses to the 9/11, there came a declaration of war, which absolutely led everybody to believe that that was the plan because it just unfolded so rapidly.
Right. Now, you make a good point. There were groups in New York that have explored this and researched this, but you said there was never any criminal action uh, at all. Was there? Is that they left that out, or what? They went to war, right?
There was no fire investigation. There was imaging from NASA about the heat in the basement where there was molten metal,
Right.
and that was a valid that was a difficult thing to reconcile. It was a developing fluid situation, and there was a lot of moving parts that were happening in our society.
Right. Many of those men, the first responders, went out there and they've come down with cancer since, many of those people, because the fumes, I think, coming off of the pile there from the World Trade Centers was very toxic. And many of those people, they, come down. I think the government's compensated those people now over the years. And I think they just recently renewed the compensation for many of those victims of the fumes and so forth that went and worked on the pile. Uh, what did you think about your work up there in New York further. It was just arduous, and of course you had some problems physically. Is that right, Charlotte? Over the years.
Yeah, well, I'm physically disabled. I have a bad back. I have a truly bad spine, and what that affects my left leg and my left hip to the point that I'm losing strength in my left leg, and sometimes I
Right.
cannot stand up straight. Sometimes I have to lay down. I have a very difficult time lifting things.
Right.
Uh, Today, I don't. I couldn't do New York again today.
Right. I know you said when you flew up there, they let you lay down on across two or three different seats. Is that right? So you
Yeah,
could make it up there?
yeah, because my injury is down by my sacroiliac joint, my sacrum
Okay.
joint, and my tailbone. It's the injury. I lost ligament at the base of my spine. They can't
Yeah.
do anything about it, and it sort of changed my whole structural. But why are we talking about this on the air?
Yeah. Well, we just need to flesh this out. And you've made some really big sacrifices, Charlotte, and I respect that. And I think it's an honor to you and what you care about in this world, really. I know that we got you a special room in New York where you could lay down and sleep, you know, because I think you had trouble sleeping in a regular bed. So up in New York at the 9/11 thing. Well, anyway, I went on some of my own experiences. I went on after that 2011 Toronto and 2012 in Vancouver, and the one in Toronto was put together by a Gurley, an attorney by the name of Gurley out of Dallas, and he got some special information out of the National Institute of Standards and Technology that had never been seen before, and it showed firemen coming out on the ground floor that had experiencing explosions on the ground floor or below in the basement. That's before the
Yes,
planes hit.
Rodriguez. Was that
What's that?
wasn't that
Well,
Rodriguez?
William Rodriguez was a janitor in the North Tower,
Now
and
I saw him speak in
he
person at the University of Texas, and it was a very profound, moving experience. I believe the
yeah,
man.
right. We were there in the grand ballroom of the student, uh, association building there, and we had about probably 400 or 500 people in there. I think the ballroom will seat about 1,200 fully full, but we had maybe half or a little over half of that filled up. So we did have quite a good audience there for William Rodriguez, and he's done some fine work. So any of our viewing audience out there, if they look up William Rodriguez, and also A&E 911truth.org is another one to look up, and just do a little
Architects,
research on this, huh?
engineers. Be sure. It sounds like you're saying A&E, which is a media company. It's architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth.
Right,
A and
A&E, yeah, yeah, okay. Anyway,
A&E.
they're out of San Francisco, and they've done some work on thermate with what their focus has been over the years. So, and I've talked to them before, interviewed the head chemist for the group out of Copenhagen, and got some really fine information from him. And he analyzed it outside of the country, like a third party analysis, not attached to the A&E group at the time.
I
And he
remember.
did, yeah,
I remember when I saw him do that for the first time that he came forward. He was interviewed prior to you by somebody
right,
else, and that footage was on the internet. And
right.
that was a very profound revelation when I saw his assessment of what had occurred. It just sent chills down my spine.
Right. So we're sitting here today, 2019, 18 years after, and I don't know if the public has ever caught on to what really went on there. I see that the story, the government story, is except for the 9/11 truth movements, it was not contradicted that much even today. What do you see, Charlotte? Not publicly.
There's a lot of disinformation and misinformation out there, a lot of bullshit. Excuse my French, but there's tremendous amount of bullshit about 9/11 on YouTube and the internet now. You have to go to reputable sites that have been in the fight since the beginning. You can't just go to these fly by night 9/11 analysis sites, because there are psychological operations, if you ask me, to purposefully confuse the to society to purposefully keep it from being properly investigated and understood.
Yeah, you know, Fran Sure, we interviewed her, and she's out of Denver and Boulder, Colorado, and she approached it from a psychological viewpoint, and I think that's what's difficult. What do you think? You think the public is having a problem psychologically dealing with 9/11? You think that's it?
You know, I don't know. All I know is there is Christopher Bolin has written some excellent books, and I think at this juncture, 18 years on, the best thing to do is to follow the people that have made the proper decisions about analysis of the data and the information and what we know about the facts. And Christopher Bolin's been an interesting person to follow, although I haven't read his book yet. He does have a website, or he does have a presence on Facebook, which is Friends Who Like Solving 9/11.
Okay.
And I encourage people to go and hook up with Christopher Bolin and track his work. He's been diligent and very. He's like an investigative reporter, and he's really brought the situation forward. I think he's a brave man.
Right. There's been a couple of videos put out, and by Dave Von Kleist and Joyce Riley, and one of those is entitled "In Plain Sight," SITEPLANE, and the second one is 9/11 Ripple Effect. And both of those I would suggest and advise our viewing audience to go to on the web and view those. And those deal primarily with the Pentagon crash attack there. And I think there's some very, very surprising things there to learn about the Pentagon attack itself. And Dave Von Kleist founded, along with Joyce Riley, the Power Hour up in Missouri. And then, of course, he left that production later, and Joyce has passed away a few years ago. So, but they both did a lot of work in this area, and they helped us get closer to the truth of what really happened. On the 9/11 attack on the Pentagon, the plane, there's no major evidence that a large plane hit the Pentagon. There's no fuselage and parts that would be there had it hit the Pentagon.
My friend who was a torpedo man in the Navy is convinced that it was not a plane. They'd said what weapon they believed was fired upon the Pentagon, but I don't want to repeat it here because I don't want to get it wrong.
Right, but
they believe it.
Yeah. There are theories about other than a plane that did hit. What's that? Say again.
A Navy torpedo man that I've known since I was basically in the Navy back in my very early 20s. That person believes that it was not a plane; it was a Tomahawk or some other sort of missile that hit the Pentagon.
Yeah, there are 5 photographs that they released early on that show something coming in at a low level, but it wouldn't be anything close to a plane at all. But so
see, they lost control of it. The people that pulled this off brought us these wars, they didn't get they couldn't control the internet. There was video released, there was audio released, there was too much first responder information that people gathered on the internet. They couldn't control their storyline. But because they controlled the major media, if you weren't on the internet during those time periods following that investigation or the 9/11 truth movement, and all you were watching was the television news, you wouldn't have a clue.
Yeah, the public in some cases is not going for the government story on this, but to launch those wars, it was a terrific mistake based upon the evidence that came out on this. Well, but the PNAC was heavily involved in this.
Well, and then check it out. And so they didn't declare war through the Congress the way we had previously because of the North Korea problem. Okay, so World War II was the last time the Congress officially declared war.
Yeah,
After that, it's been military action. And so we lost control of the military right after World War II, if you ask me.
right. Yeah, wars have to be declared by Congress according to the Constitution.
But that's
And
not what's happening.
I know many of these things, these kinds of wars and so forth, have not been constitutionally approved by Congress. I know it's a difficult thing to even deal with these days because we're way outside the Constitution in many ways. And what would be some of your closing comments on this, Charlotte, on 9/11 and the first responders up there in New York, many of those have died because of the toxic fumes, and they
Yeah, I
worked out
remember we
there.
raised
They were
money.
what's that?
Don't you remember doing raising about $1,500 for them
Yeah, I think we
on
did.
the
We
live
did
stream?
raise some money, didn't we? Yeah, yeah, we did. We did some things. We did some broadcasts with some of the. There was a union man that we interviewed. You remember him? And he
I don't.
represented
We
many of the
interviewed
first
people.
responders up in New York. Yeah, we interviewed a union representative leader, and we got a really good interview with him and tried to help some of the first responders. But anyway, I'm going to just sign off here and say, let's pray for this country coming out of this delusional state, is the way I describe it, and try to build a better America that's more truth filled. What do you think, Charlotte?
I want to go with the new Trump motto, which is "Keep America Great."